Welcome to another week of wisdom. Looking at the wisdom series, we're at offense week 2. Looking at the entrepreneur under the influence of offense. And last week we exposed the trap. But this week, so if you're not quite sure about what we referred to last week, you can check on over on our YouTube. That will be up. If you're completely new to what wisdom is a series that we just speak into the lives of the founders, the entrepreneurs of businesses, on applying biblical wisdom in the way that they operate their business and ventures. Currently, now we're at week 12, looking at the second week of offense. All the episodes are completely for free. It's up on our socials. But please, they do come with resources, short resources, from a I'd say from a consultant point of view that includes a bit more than just the actual resources of the topic. And that's up on our newsletter. So please just join our newsletters completely for free. It's fluff free and you'll get sound to up to date with all of this. You can support the journey by literally just following along on what we do. So last week we exposed the trap, but this week we kind of walk into it because offense doesn't just live in theory. It lives in meetings. It lives in WhatsApp replies. It lives in that one small email you read 3 times because of kind of like the tone. And here's the dangerous part. You don't say, I am offended. You say, I'm just being careful. You say, I've learned how people are. Or you say something like, I'm protecting my time. Meanwhile, something is slowly shifting inside of you. And according to The Bait of Satan, which is a book by John Bevere, that is a lot of the resources on this offense journey from wisdom is based on that. This is exactly how the trap works. It doesn't feel like a trap, it feels like discernment. But it's not, it's deception because offense, once taken, begins to distort your perception. So let's look at what offense looks like inside an entrepreneur and especially inside an entrepreneur's journey. And there's 7 topics that I briefly want to touch, 20 minutes max. And here we go. And let's get some brutal practicality in there. Offense in business is not shouting. It's subtle. It shows up like this. You stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. You assume an intent before asking questions. You interpret tone instead of clarifying the meaning. And slowly you start building distance, not physical distance, but relational distance. Offense doesn't just hurt relationships, it restructures your thinking, it creates a filter. And once that filter is in place, everything, everything gets interpreted through that lens. Now bring that into your business. A client gives you feedback, and instead of hearing insight, you hear criticism. A team member asks a question, instead of seeing engagement, you feel challenged. A partner delays, and instead of understanding the context, you assume disrespect. This is not leadership anymore. This is reaction. And reaction led businesses don't scale. They survive at most, kind of like until they don't. Then we get the progression. This is where it gets kind of like dangerous. One of the most powerful warnings from the topic is not just that offense is a trap, but that it has a progression. It doesn't stay small, it grows. It starts as hurt, then becomes offense, then becomes justification, then becomes separation, and eventually it turns into isolation. And Bevere also explains that offense often leads to deeper emotional states like betrayal and even hostility if left unchecked. Now pause right there because that progression happens in business more than we actually admit. You don't fire someone because of one moment. You are kind of like forced and required by HR to build a case. You don't lose a client because of one interaction. You withdraw slowly. You don't destroy a partnership overnight. You stop communicating properly. And by the time the damage is visible, the root has been growing for months. And that's offense. Not explosive, but very erosive. And when it comes to your clients, this is where offense kills a lot of opportunity. So let's zoom into clients, because this is where entrepreneurs lose the money without realizing why. A client questions your pricing, you feel undervalued. A client delays payment, you feel disrespected. A client pushes back, you feel challenged. Now, if you're operating clean, you respond with clarity. You ask better questions. You understand their positions. You lead the conversation. But if offense is present, you shift. You become shorter, less patient, more rigid, and eventually you stop seeing the client. You only see the problem. And that's where you lose. Because business is built on understanding people, not reacting to them. What about teams where offense destroys culture? Now let's go, into that internal structure. This is where offense does its deepest damage. If you were to ask a business consultant like myself, because leadership is relational and offense breaks relationship quietly. A team member challenges you in a meeting. If your heart is clean, you evaluate. If your heart is offended, you remember. And once you remember, you start treating them differently. Maybe not obviously, but subtly. You give them less opportunity. You trust them less. You interpret their actions differently. And here's the scary part, they actually do feel it, but they don't always understand it. So now your client and your culture shifts. People become cautious, less open, less honest, and eventually less engaged. Not because of policy, but because of unspoken tension. And Solomon already warned, about this. And if we look at Proverbs, which is the book, obviously, that inspires this wisdom series that we do live every Tuesday, he says that an offended person builds up walls, and once a leader builds walls, the team stops coming in. The fifth thing that I want to look at is new ventures, because as entrepreneurs, we're constantly looking for new ventures. So, where offense blocks growth. Let's talk about something you didn't expect. Offense doesn't just affect relationships, it affects opportunity, because offense narrows your vision. You stop collaborating, you stop trusting, you stop exploring, because somewhere along the line, someone burned you. So now you say, I don't do partnerships anymore. I'd rather do it myself. I've learned my lesson. And while all of that sounds wise, might actually be wounded leadership. And wounded leadership builds small businesses, not because of lack of ability, because of lack of openness. And here's the tension. Yes, you must be wise. Yes, you must be discerning, but wisdom is not withdrawal wisdom, right? Wisdom is clear eyed engagement without the offense. The second last part is what it looks like when offense is removed. So let's kind of like flip this over, because this is where it becomes powerful. When offense is removed, everything sharpens. You listen better, you respond better, you lead better, you don't react to tone, you interpret intent. You don't assume the worst, you explore possibility. You don't build walls, you build clarity. And this is what Jesus pushes toward constantly. He pushes towards this freedom. Because when offense is completely gone, you are not carrying weight you were never meant to carry. And suddenly, your leadership becomes lighter, not weaker, but clearer and stronger. Then, of course, the internal check, where it becomes real, because this is where the shift happens, not in theory, in awareness. You need to start asking yourself, where have I become reactive? Who do I interpret negatively without checking? Where have I withdrawn instead of resolved? Where am I building a case instead of building clarity? Because remember this, offense is not always loud. Sometimes it's just distance, but distance kills leadership. And here's the warning, especially to the entrepreneurs. You can have the best strategy, the best product, the best positioning. But if offense is sitting in your heart, you will leak, it will leak into everything, into your tone, your decision, your culture. It will leak into your growth. And eventually it will show up in your results because offense doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how you lead. And leadership determines everything. So this week, don't just watch your actions, watch your interpretation because that's where the trap is. And the moment you catch it, you don't just avoid damage, you unlock clarity. And clarity is where real growth begins. Enjoy your Tuesday. Thank you for joining in.